The night had already fallen over St. Mary's Hospital, the corridors glowing with the faint hum of fluorescent lights that flickered like tired eyes refusing to sleep. Most of the nurses had signed out, the chatter in the staff room replaced by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the soft shuffle of night duty. But among those who remained was Nurse Emily Carter, a young woman whose compassion was the heartbeat of the ward. She was supposed to finish her shift 2 hours ago, but something about room 307 kept her from leaving. Inside lay Mr. Arthur Hayes, an elderly man with silver hair, a neatly trimmed beard, and eyes that held a universe of stories he no longer cared to tell. His medical chart described him as stable but lonely, recovering from a mild heart attack. Yet, there was something deeper, an invisible wound that no medication could heal. Emily noticed it the moment she met him. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his voice trembled not from weakness, but from the weight of silence he'd carried too long. That night, as the clock struck 9 o'clock, Emily peeked into his room once more before leaving. Arthur sat by the window, staring at the rain painting silver streaks down the glass. "You should be resting," she said softly. Arthur turned, his eyes glinting under the dim light. "Rest comes easy to those who have something to wake up for," he murmured. The words froze her steps. Emily hesitated, then stepped inside. She pulled a chair next to his bed. "Would you like some company?" she asked. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides more sorrow than joy. "If you don't mind wasting your evening on an old man." Emily shook her head. "It's not wasting time if it means something." For the next hour, the two talked, or rather, Emily listened as Arthur slowly peeled back the layers of his life. He had been a successful businessman once, owner of several properties, factories, and enterprises across the country. But wealth hadn't protected him from loss. His wife, Margaret, had passed away 5 years earlier. Since then, his world had grown quiet, his home empty. "I built empires," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "but I couldn't build time. I would give everything I have just to sit with her again for one more evening." Emily felt her throat tighten. She had seen grief before, but this was different. This was a man who had everything the world admired, yet none of it mattered without love. She reached out, gently resting her hand on his. "You must have loved her very much," she said. Arthur nodded. "She was my light, my reason. Without her, the days all looked the same." They sat in silence for a moment, the rain outside echoing the ache in the room. Emily looked around, the hospital bed, the sterile walls, the untouched meal tray, and she couldn't help but think of her own life. She'd chosen nursing because she wanted to heal people, not just their bodies, but their spirits. And in that instant, she realized Arthur needed healing of the soul. So, she stayed. She told him stories, about her small apartment with creaky floors, about her dream of traveling someday, about how her late mother used to say that kindness is the language the deaf can hear and the blind can see. Arthur listened, really listened, and for the first time in years, he laughed. A real, deep laugh that seemed to chase away the shadows. Time slipped quietly. Midnight approached, and the hospital grew still. Emily brought him tea and tucked his blanket tighter. "You remind me of Margaret," Arthur said suddenly. "She used to make me tea every night, just like this." Emily smiled softly. "Then maybe she sent me here to remind you that love doesn't end, it just changes form." Arthur blinked back tears. "You speak like her too. Always believed in love beyond the grave." Emily leaned closer. "Maybe she's still around, watching over you, waiting for you to smile again." Arthur looked out the window and whispered, "Maybe." The next morning, Emily returned early, even though it wasn't her shift. She wanted to check on him. But when she entered room 307, the bed was empty. For a moment, her heart sank, until she saw him sitting by the window again, holding a small leather notebook. "Good morning," he greeted her with an unexpected brightness. "I did some thinking last night." He handed her the notebook. Inside, in elegant handwriting, was a note, for Nurse Emily Carter, who reminded me that kindness still exists. I had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for with heart. Beneath it was another page, folded neatly, a legal document. Emily's eyes widened as she read. It was a will, signed and notarized. Arthur Hayes had named her as the beneficiary of his charitable foundation, entrusting her to lead it after his passing. She looked up in shock. "Mr. Hayes, I can't accept this." But Arthur smiled calmly. It's not for you, it's for the world, through you. You gave me something money couldn't buy, peace. I want you to keep giving it to others. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. But you barely know me. He chuckled. Sometimes a single night is enough to know someone's soul. Over the next few weeks, Arthur's health improved. He began to take short walks, smiled more often, even chatted with other patients. The staff noticed the change, his laughter echoed down the corridors, and his once empty eyes now held light. Emily visited him daily, not as a nurse, but as a friend. They shared books, old photographs, and late-night talks about life, regret, and hope. It was as if fate had woven their paths together for a purpose neither of them could fully see. But time, as always, had its own plans. One morning, Emily arrived to find his room empty again, but this time, the chair by the window was still. On the bedside table lay the leather notebook, a small bouquet of lilies, and a note written in trembling handwriting, "Don't grieve, Emily. You gave me back my will to live long enough to say goodbye with peace. Promise me you'll keep helping others find their light." Arthur Hayes had passed away quietly in his sleep, just as he had wished, at peace, under the morning sun streaming through the window. Emily sat in silence, her tears falling on the note, but a small smile touched her lips. She whispered, "I promise." Months later, the world came to know the story. The Hayes Foundation for Compassionate Care was launched, with Emily Carter as its director. It funded free medical treatment for the elderly and lonely, built homes for retired caregivers, and supported nursing scholarships. News outlets covered it as the legacy of a millionaire's final act of gratitude, but for Emily, it wasn't about money. It was about a night when two souls met in the quiet of a hospital room and reminded each other that humanity is worth believing in. Every time she walked through the hospital halls, she felt his presence, the men who taught her that even in the final chapters of life, love can rewrite the ending. One evening, after a long day of foundation work, Emily stood by her office window, watching the sunset bathe the city in gold. She opened the same leather notebook Arthur had left her. On the last page, she noticed something she hadn't before, faintly etched words that read, "To those who care beyond duty, the world belongs." She smiled through tears, whispering, "You were right, Arthur." The orange sky faded into night, but Emily felt no darkness, because she carried light now, the kind that spreads from one heart to another. If you're watching this story right now, remember this: kindness doesn't need wealth, status, or reward. It just needs time, presence, and heart. You never know whose life you might touch, whose hope you might reignite, or whose story you might change forever. So, if this story moved you, even just a little, take a moment to share a bit of kindness today. And if you believe that love and compassion can still change the world, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more real, heart-touching stories that remind us all what truly matters. Because sometimes, the smallest act of care can leave the greatest legacy.